The silence hit me before I even got my coat off. You know that feeling? When a space is so quiet it's loud. Usually, I'd be hit with the smell of garlic and the sound of some indie band I'd never heard of. But tonight, there was just nothing. His corner of the living room, the one with the easel and the canvases stacked against the wall, was bare, like completely empty. I walked into the bedroom, and his closet was half empty. And then I saw it. The only thing he left for me, stuck to the stainless steel fridge with a stupid little magnet. It wasn't a note. God, no, it was a past due notice for the rent, stamped in bright red ink. He handled the bills. And in that moment, I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. I just felt gone. I sank onto the couch, the leather suddenly feeling vast and cold. It's funny, the things your brain decides to show you when it all goes to hell. It's not a highlight reel of happy moments. It's more like evidence. A series of exhibits in a trial where you are both the prosecutor and the defendant. My mind just started playing the movie, right from the beginning, Chapter 1. Us, 3 years ago, in our tiny first apartment, the one that always smelled like a weird mix of turpentine and last night's takeout pizza. He was in the middle of a commission, I remember that now. Some intricate design for a local brewery. His fingers were smudged with charcoal, and he was so in the zone, that quiet hum of creativity filling the small space. We called it the pact. God, that sounds so clinical now, so transactional. My career in finance was taking off, like really taking off. Long hours, high stress, but the paychecks were getting bigger and bigger. Daniel, he was a freelance graphic designer, incredibly talented, but his work was feast or famine. So I laid it all out, not like a lover, but like a CEO pitching a merger. We need to optimize, I remember saying, probably using my work voice. We need to streamline our domestic workflow. I actually said workflow. I sold it to him as a partnership, a well-oiled machine. I'll be the engine, I'd said, all confidence and ambition. You be the anchor. You handle the house, the meals, the life admin, everything. Just create a perfect, seamless home base for me, and I'll make sure we never have to worry about money again. I saw a flicker of something in his eyes then. Hesitation? Maybe. A tiny bit of sadness for the brewery logo he'd have to turn down. I chose to see it as him being overwhelmed with the brilliance of my plan. He looked at me with those big, earnest eyes, the ones that used to make my stomach do a little flip. He put his paint-stained hands on my shoulders and said, "You go out there and conquer the world, Elodie. I'll make sure you always have a safe place to land." And I felt this surge of, not just love, but relief. Like I just closed the most important deal of my life. I didn't see it as him making a sacrifice. I saw it as him accepting his new role. Watching that memory now, from this empty living room, it doesn't feel like a plan. It feels like a contract I tricked him into signing. The machine wasn't well-oiled. It was just a cage, and I was the one who handed him the key and told him it was a promotion. For a while, the machine worked. Or so I told myself. I'd come home, exhausted from a 12-hour day, and the apartment would be an oasis. Dinner would be on the table, something complex and delicious he'd spent hours on. My dry cleaning would be hanging in the closet, my work shirts perfectly pressed. It was efficient. And in my world, efficiency was the highest virtue. But now, sitting in the silence, the movie in my head keeps playing the scenes I used to fast forward through. The uncomfortable ones, the ones that make my stomach clench. Like the time Daniel spent a whole week on a new painting. It wasn't just some random landscape. It was the pier where we had our third date, the one where we stayed out so late we saw the sunrise. He'd been obsessed with getting the light just right, the way it shimmered on the water. He was so proud of it, you know? He had that little kid energy, practically bouncing on his feet when he finally showed it to me, a nervous smile on his face. "What do you think?" he'd asked, his eyes searching mine for something. Approval, praise. I barely glanced up from my laptop where I was knee-deep in quarterly reports. "It's great, honey. Really nice colors." Then, without taking a breath, I added, "Hey, speaking of dates, did you remember to schedule my dentist appointment and call the plumber about the sink?" I can see his face now, with perfect, horrifying clarity. The light just switched off. His shoulders slumped just a little, but it was enough. He nodded slowly, carefully leaned the painting against the wall, facing away from me, and went to find the plumber's number. I didn't even register it. To me, the sink was the priority. The sink was part of the workflow, The painting, his passion, his gift to us was just a hobby, a distraction from his real job. Then there were the dinners with my friends. God, the friends, all of them in high-powered, cutthroat jobs just like me. We'd sit around at some trendy new restaurant, drinking wine that cost more than my first car, complaining about our incompetent assistants, and celebrating our latest kills on the market. They'd inevitably ask about Daniel, and I'd perform. "Oh, Daniel's my secret weapon," I'd say with a theatrical laugh, reaching over to pat his hand. "He's the CEO of the Elodie Support Corporation. His main KPIs are thread count and organic groceries." They'd all coo about how progressive we were, how lucky I was. But I felt their judgment, or maybe I was just projecting my own insecurities onto them, so I'd push it further. "Seriously, the man's a domestic god. I've got him trained perfectly." And everyone would laugh. Daniel would laugh too, but it was a tight, thin sound, a performance to match my own. He never said anything. Not at the table, not in the car on the way home. He'd just be a little quieter. A little more distant, focusing on refilling everyone's water glasses as if he were the hired help. I told myself he was just tired. I told myself he was in on the joke. I never once considered that to him. It wasn't a joke at all. It was just my truth, served cold in front of an audience. The movie in my head slows down now, zooming in on last Tuesday. The climax. The part of the horror film where the main character opens the one door she was explicitly told not to open. I'd had a monster of a day. A junior analyst, that smug kid fresh out of Wharton, had basically stolen my pitch for the Henderson account and presented it as his own. My boss, of course, loved it. I spent the entire day fuming, feeling powerless and disrespected. I walked in the door carrying all that rage like a ticking bomb. The apartment smelled amazing, like roasted chicken and rosemary. Daniel was at the stove, humming along to some song. He turned around with a bright smile. "Hey, you rough day?" he asked, already reaching for a wine glass to pour for me. "You have no idea," I muttered, dropping my briefcase on the floor with a thud that made him jump. We sat down to eat. He'd made my favorite, even roasted the potatoes just how I like them, extra crispy. He started telling me about his day, something about a new online art course he'd found, his voice full of a gentle excitement that on any other day I would have found endearing. But that night it just grated on me. It sounded frivolous, unimportant. Then I took a bite of the chicken, and it was just salty, like distractingly salty, and the bomb went off. I dropped my fork. It clattered against the plate, a sound that seemed to echo in the sudden silence. "Is this a joke?" I asked, my voice dangerously low. He looked confused. "What? What's wrong?" "The chicken, Daniel. It's inedible. It's like you dumped the whole salt shaker on it." "Oh God, I'm sorry. I must have." I didn't let him finish. All the frustration from my day, from my entire career, from my stupid, competitive friends, it all came pouring out, aimed directly at him. "I work a 60-hour week. I deal with condescending assholes and impossible deadlines. I bring home the money that pays for this apartment, this food, that fancy olive oil you love so much. And the one thing I ask of you, the one thing is to handle things here, to make one decent meal. And you can't even do that. What is it that you actually do all day?" He just stared at me, his face pale. The hurt in his eyes was so naked, so profound, it should have stopped me. It should have made me feel like the monster I was, but I was too far gone. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Honestly, what's the point of you? Don't forget, Daniel, I'm the one paying for all this. I'm the one keeping you." He didn't yell. He didn't argue. He just looked at me, and all the love, all the warmth I had taken for granted for 3 years just vanished from his face. It was replaced by a calm, chilling emptiness. He picked up his fork, took a bite of the salty chicken, and chewed it slowly. Then he looked me right in the eye and said, in a voice that was barely a whisper, "You're right. I'm sorry." The next morning was the strangest part. It was normal, terrifyingly, unnervingly normal. I woke up braced for a fight, or at least a thick, suffocating silence that you could cut with a knife. Instead, Daniel was already in the kitchen. The coffee maker was gurgling its final, familiar sounds. He was packing a small lunch for me, a turkey sandwich on rye, crusts cut off, just how I like it. He didn't say much, but he wasn't cold. He was just quiet, neutral, like a polite stranger you're sharing a short-term rental with. A part of me, a small, sane part, knew I had been a monster. My words from the night before echoed in my head, and they sounded ugly, pathetic, even to me. But a much larger, louder part of my brain was already building a defense. He needed to understand the pressure I'm under. It was just tough love. He's too sensitive. The lies we tell ourselves, right? They're the most convincing ones. So I clung to them and played along with the charade. "Thanks for the coffee," I said, my voice a little too loud in the quiet room as I grabbed my travel mug. He nodded, his eyes focused on folding the wax paper around my sandwich. "No problem." As I was heading for the door, my heels clicking on the hardwood floor, I paused. I almost said it. I swear to God, I almost turned around and said, "I'm sorry." The words were right there on the tip of my tongue, physically present. 3 simple syllables that could have changed everything. But they felt like they were caught behind a dam of pride and fear. To say them would be to admit I was wrong, that our whole system was flawed, that I was flawed. It felt like conceding defeat, so I defaulted to what I knew, control. I turned back, but the apology died. Instead, I said, "I think I'd like pasta for dinner tonight. Maybe that carbonara you make?" It wasn't about the food, it was a test. It was me saying, "The fight is over, you lost, now get back in your place." It was my way of re-establishing the old order, of pretending last night's cruelty was just a necessary course correction. He looked up then, and for a split second, I saw everything in his eyes. A flicker of profound, bottomless sadness. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by that same blank mask. He just nodded again. "Okay," he said. It was the last word he ever said to me. When I came home that evening, the silence that greeted me wasn't temporary. It was permanent. I see it so clearly now. His quiet politeness that morning, it wasn't him getting over it. It was a ceasefire. He was just running out the clock, giving himself enough time to pack his bags and disappear while I was busy conquering the world. He wasn't forgiving me, he was extracting himself. The numbness started to wear off around day 3, replaced by a frantic, clawing panic. The quiet of the apartment was no longer a neutral space. It was an accusation. Every empty hanger in his closet, every bare spot on the bookshelf screamed at me. I called him, straight to voicemail. I texted him, a long, rambling message that swung wildly between "I'm so sorry, I was a monster," and "How could you just leave like this without a word?" Delivered. Not read, blocked. I tried WhatsApp, Instagram, even his old, barely used Facebook account. Nothing. It was like he had been digitally erased from my life, a clean, swift amputation. My next move was to call his sister, Sarah. We'd always been friendly, you know? Christmas parties, the occasional brunch. I saw her as an ally, a neutral third party who could mediate. I was so wrong. When she picked up, her voice was cold enough to freeze water. "What do you want, Elodie?" No hello, no preamble, just a verbal wall. I launched into my practiced, slightly tearful speech, the one I'd been rehearsing in my head. "Sarah, I'm so worried. I don't know where Daniel is. We had a stupid fight. I said some awful things I didn't mean, and he just left." There was a long, heavy silence on the other end of the line. I could hear her take a deep, weary breath, the kind you take before you have to do something you really don't want to do. "A stupid fight," she finally said, her voice dripping with a kind of pitying contempt. "Is that what you're calling it?" It was about dinner. He made the chicken too salty." My voice trailed off. Saying it out loud made it sound even more insane. She cut me off with a short, harsh laugh that had no humor in it. "Oh, Elodie, you really, truly don't get it, do you? This was never about the chicken. Do you have any idea how many times he's called me, crying, after one of your little jokes, in front of your friends? The CEO of the Elodie Support Corporation. I've got him trained perfectly. Did you think he didn't have a phone? That he couldn't call his own sister and tell her that his partner was humiliating him for sport?" My throat went dry. My carefully constructed reality started to crack. He told you that. "He told me everything," she said, her voice rising with a protective fury. "He told me how you made him feel like a servant, like his only value was in how well he could anticipate your needs. He told me he felt like he was disappearing, piece by piece. He called me last month, Elodie. Last month. He was trying to finish a painting, the first one he'd been excited about in years, and he told me he had to hide it when he heard your car in the driveway because he didn't want you to ask him why he was wasting time on it instead of ironing your shirts. He said," she looks at me, but I don't think she sees me at all. Your little outburst over the chicken wasn't the start of the fire. It was just the fucking smoke alarm finally going off. The line went dead. She'd hung up on me. I stood there, phone in my hand, her words echoing in the crushing silence. A smoke alarm. That's all I was to him in the end. A loud, obnoxious noise, signaling an emergency that had been burning for years, while I was too busy admiring my own reflection in the flames. Weeks have blurred into a monotonous, gray fog. I paid the rent. I hired a cleaning service because the dust bunnies were starting to feel like the only other living things in the apartment. I go to work. I come home. The machine I was so proud of building now just serves me, and I've discovered it's a cold, empty existence. I eat takeout over the sink and leave the container on the counter for days. I don't talk to my friends anymore. How can I? What would I say? Hey guys, remember my hilarious domestic god? Turns out he had a soul, and I crushed it for your amusement. The thought of their pity is somehow worse than their judgment. My nights are the worst. That's when the silence is the loudest. So I've developed a new routine. A sick, obsessive ritual. I made a fake Instagram account. A burner profile with a stolen picture of a sunset and a generic name. And I stalk Daniel's sister. I refresh her feed 100 times a day. Most of it is just pictures of her kids, her dog, stupid motivational quotes. But I keep digging, scrolling, desperate for a clue, a sign of life. And then, last night, I found it. It was a new post. A picture, slightly blurry, taken inside what looked like a small, crowded art gallery. And there he was, Daniel. He was standing next to one of his paintings, that moody coastal landscape he'd shown me, the one I'd dismissed. He was smiling. Not the tight, polite smile he used for my friends, but a real one. It was wide and a little shy, and it reached his eyes, crinkling the corners. He looked younger. He looked happy. Sarah's caption read, "So incredibly proud of my little brother for his first solo show. He's finally doing what he was always meant to do." I stared at that picture until my eyes burned. At him, at the man I thought I knew, the man I thought I owned. He wasn't my anchor. He was a goddamn ship, and I had kept him tied to the dock for 3 years, convinced his only purpose was to serve my harbor. And now he was finally out at sea, and he was magnificent. The tears finally came then, hot and useless. I hadn't just lost a partner, I had destroyed a home. And for what? For the right to say, I was the one paying for the salt.